Om Asajaya Malamanta Anutana Malaganta Malavanasa Kosajam Pamado Rakato Malam Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. Negligence is the rust of the watchman at the city gates, leading to calamity. Similarly, lack of recitation of wisdom scriptures is the rust of monasteries. And lack of spiritual self-effort is the rust of households, leading to the calamity of the loss of the Dharma and the loss of individual spirituality. Om, peace, peace, peace. Om Abhyasa Vairagya Brahm Tanarudaha Tata Stitau Yatno Brasaha Satur Dirgakala Nirantarya Satkara Sevika Dridda Bhumi. Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. The combination of constant practice along with detachment from the world is capable of destroying all the negative thought waves in the mind. The combination of these two is what is called authentic sadhana, spiritual practice. But this practice must be maintained for a very long time in the atmosphere of faith and devotion. So say the seers. Om, peace, peace, peace. Om Sahana, Om Sahana Vavatu, Sahano Bhunaktu, Sahaviryam Karavavahai, Tejasvi Navaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman protect us. May Brahman sustain us. May Brahman illumine our thinking process and free us from all fault finding, reveal to us the essence of the scriptures. Om, peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om Tat Sat. So today, with special guests present, we are entering into a one-off class that brings in facets of two great yogis. I just chanted from the teachings of both of them. Lord Buddha first, who is India's consummate yogi, and chanted from the Dhammapada about the rust of households and the rust of monasteries. You could see that he must have had a very critical view of the new Buddhism. And it's like there was no Christianity when Christ walked the earth. There was no Buddhism either to speak of when Gautama Buddha was present. This was all the refreshing of the Dharma, as Sri Krishna says. From age to age, I embody myself forth for the destruction of the old Dharma, the resurrection of the new Dharma, because religion deteriorates over time. And we know that's called in our tradition the four yugas. It is Satya Yuga, come back Satya Yuga, we want you. Age of light, age of reason, age of higher reason. And then the Treta Yuga, that's when Sri Ram was walking the earth. And Treta Yuga avatar. And then Dwapara Yuga was when Sri Krishna, whom I just mentioned, was incarnated. And now we have the Kali Yuga here, which is upon us. The teaching about that, as we've been repeating at satsangs and God blogs recently, is that it's a downward spiral that nobody can prevent. And you just want to make sure that you don't get sucked down with it, because that would be getting on the wheel of samsara, equivalent to that in Buddhism, or the Kala Chakra, Lord Buddha called it, the wheel of time. Consciousness is ever free of time. Consciousness is in one eternal moment. And everything that's in that one eternal moment is stored by perfect recall, by the Mahashakti herself, by the Divine Mother of the universe, whose birthday is coming up in a few days, Saraswati Devi. And everything that's projected into the time, which can be a trap. Mental projection is sankalpa. Nobody can be a yogi if you're given to too much sankalpa. Krishna says to Arjuna in the Gita. But in the case of the eternal moment, that's omniscience. That's foresight into everything that's going to come. And what's going to come in the Kali Yuga is the deterioration of all dharma and the disappearance of all name and form, nama rupa, in time and space, desha kala. And it'll also, fortunately, dissipate cause and effect, karma. Nama rupa desha kala nimitta is how the great seers like Buddha, all the way up to this time, Swami Vivekananda, who could be called the modern Buddha, now have mentioned in terms of that word Maya, which I just also talked about in terms of samsara. So that downward moving spiral, you want to extract yourself off of that and keep yourself in a high state of mind called samadhi or nirvana, or Father of Yoga called it a sampragyata. Zen calls it satori. It's called fana in the Muslim tradition. There are all sorts of religious traditions that have reached such a high state and have maintained themselves there. That is not just avatars, but prophets, seers, saints, agryanas in terms of the Advaita Vedantas, Gaudapada and Shankara. And the father of yoga, Patanjali, whom I chanted 2 seconds. So first of all, it was the rust of monasteries, the rust of households. How can we extract ourselves from that downward spiral that's happening to people in the world? Forgetfulness, basically, is what it is. And so when you come around to just trying to define enlightenment, and it's just remembrance, basically, because all of the schools of mind-only schools, including most of the Buddhist schools and most of the darshanas in India, like Vedanta and yoga, are telling you the same truth, that there's this one self that's indivisible, and thou art that. And the variety and the multiplicity and the duality and the multifariousness of everything belongs to nature, belongs to Maya, belongs to samsara, belongs to that wheel of time. And you are never in Maya. Maya is in you. That's how Vivekananda put it. You are never in Maya. Maya is in you. So be done with it. Waken up to your true nature, your Buddha nature, or your Atman, as we say in our tradition. Same thing. It's the anatman that's the source of problem. Basically, the anatman means the ego. In Buddhism, anatman means ahamkara in Vedanta, or the ego, the unripe ego. That's the non-self. And that's the mischievous fellow that we're always trying to reduce or trying to ripen, if you look at the teachings of Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. Apakvahamkara, apakvahamkara. We need to ripen that ego, because there's a station between the ego and realization of your true nature. Call it what you will. Tathagata Garbha, Buddha used that. He must have believed in it. If he used a word like that, it's pure conscious awareness. There's a station between that called the witness, Sakshi Bhutam, witnesses all phenomena. And that's that great soul, Rishi, sage, seer, prophet, avatara, Agrayana, that has raised himself up and out of that downward spiral and is fully content and in peace of mind and very blissful too, to remain there in that high state while everything else goes to hell in a hat basket. And so schools like mind-only schools like Vedanta and Buddhism have been sometimes criticized for lacking compassion. Funny, isn't it, that the most compassionate beings in the world get criticized later for being uncompassionate, like the Lord Buddha, for instance, because the philosophy is so abstruse and terse and non-forgiving and uncompromising. If you want to be an Agrayana or a knower of non-duality or non-dual truth, then you're going to have to satisfy certain criterion, and those can't be pretended. They can't be compromised. So when we're looking at someone like Lord Buddha, I just chanted from the Dhammapada. The Dhammapada is the original Buddhist scripture in India. And he was born in India. Well, don't tell the Nepalese that because the borders changed. But now the Nepalese are claiming Buddha for their own. But back then, he was an Indian yogi, a Hindu man, Buddha. And 650 years later, maybe 700 years, they don't know for sure, Patanjali came forth, the father of yoga. This is the father of the eight-limbed yoga, by the way, not what people are taking to be yoga today, which is a regimen of physical exercises. But the real yoga is called Raja Yoga, or sometimes they refer to it as Ashtanga, eight-limbed. So it's definitely got much more than body exercises called asanas in it. And it's also sometimes termed one of the four great yogas. Krishna called it Buddhi Yoga. It's named after Buddha almost. So it's that yoga of intelligence that uses discrimination between the changing and the unchanging to keep yourself up and out of that downward spiral all the time. In other words, living in that eternal moment and not falling off of it. That's called the insomnia of yoga in my tradition. My teacher, Swami Sheshanandaji, and my householder teacher, that is Lex Hickson, president of the founder of the SRV Association, said, I have the insomnia of yoga, Babaji, do you want it? I said, insomnia, I don't know about that. And he said, I can transmit it to you. So I hung around with him for a while. And sure enough, I began to stay in an ever awake state, which, means that the body needs to sleep, surely, but the mind can remain awake while the body sleeps. That mind is pure mind. That mind is Buddha mind. That mind is no mind. That mind is Chit-Shuddhi. That mind is non-dual mind. And that never sleeps. And that's your true nature. So when you focus on it, then, of course, in 7 different religious traditions of the world, they have different names for it. It's the Agya Chakra Krishna talks about in the Gita. And, or third eye we're talking about nowadays. But that's that combination of Dhyan Yoga. So if you put something like Raja Yoga from Lord Patanjali together with Dhyan Yoga of Lord Buddha, that is a meditation yoga, then you've got two of the four great yogas of the world. That is, first there's the Bhakti Yoga, which everyone should have. It's almost natural that you should have that. It's not a matter of contesting whether or not you should love God or not. God's all there is, so you can't help but love it. One friend on Maui, some 20 years ago, what God is, Bob, I don't know. All I know is I love it. See? So that was an old man that told me that. So that Bhakti Yoga is called, and then the Jnana Yoga is what we're doing now. We're looking into slokas and scriptures, and we'll view a few charts. We're going to put together the two great eights, which when I last asked last week, what shall I teach next week? Then next week, one of my students said, why don't you go teach that one chart that you haven't taught yet on Ashtanga Marga and Ashtanga Yoga? So as I was saying, maybe 600, 700 years after Lord Buddha was born in India and went into what we call Nirvikalpa Samadhi or Mahanirvana, the father of yoga was born, father of the eight-limb yoga, Patanjali. And that was the second chant I used today. He was talking about Abhyasa Yoga combined with Vairagya. Abhyasa Vairagyabhyam Tan Nirudaha. It will destroy Niruddha, all the negative thoughts in your mind if you put them together. So this is why putting together more than one yoga into a synthesis or into an integration is very powerful practice. It will get rid of the rust of monasteries. It will get rid of the rust of households. Right now, we probably need it more in the household than we do in the monastery. So this will produce then great children in us again. Souls who are high-minded will begin to be attracted to the earth, like has been in India for so long, and Tibet recently, and China at times. Got to attract these great souls back from the inner realms, where they're holding subtle bodies. And I was in one of the subtle realms 2 nights ago in a profound dream about my teacher, Swami Sheshanandaji Maharaj, peace and bliss be upon him. And I was in his ashram. So I realized the ashram I used to attend when he was alive in Portland, Oregon, was a part of that new ashram that he had in the inner realms. And so I walked in there and I saw the Portland ashram held with all the grounds and the houses and some of the students that I knew there inside that ashram. And then I went and saw my teacher and listened to him talk and saw the gods looking down. The roof of my guru's Portland, Oregon ashram did not have the gods looking through the ceiling. But the ashram of this one that I saw 2 nights ago had the gods looking through. So I could look at the gods and they could look at me as if I were some oddity. Oh, there's one of those earth creatures, you see, that's causing so much problems. And they were looking through portholes down, into his ashram. He was just, moving around like he wasn't 90 years old anymore. So I'm just saying that basically this inner realms, we want to make ourselves so qualified and so fit if we are going to be householders, if we're going to have children, that these great souls will get attracted to earth again. And I was writing yesterday about a seminar I'll teach next year, how to make the gods revisit us, because the West has lost the gods. The gods that we used to know, Greek and Roman, have also disappeared with the cultures, and they're not being worshipped anymore. In the East, you still have some memory, divine memory of the gods, but in the West, God is sometimes called a memory, but the gods have been forgotten. So that's another thing we need to bring back is a relationship with the gods. And when we do, nature will stop being so vicious to us. Because those gods are the gods of fire, Agni, the gods of water, the gods of earth, Apaho, the gods of air, and the gods of ether. Those are the gods of the 5 elements, and they come through us through the 5 senses, right? Earth to taste, earth to smell, water to taste, sight to fire, hearing to air, touch to air, and hearing to ether, right? That's the first lesson you learn in yoga. It's called Yoga 101. Hatha Yoga isn't even 101 yet. It's just a tiny little branch off of one root of the tree of yoga. But this first real 101 teaching is about how to connect yourself back to earth and senses and how they have a natural inherent connection already. And all you have to do is make sure that it doesn't get rusty. Rust of households, rust of ashrams, rust of monasteries. Yeah. How to keep that Shakti power, we like to call it in our tradition, flowing through everything. So that's why I started out with two slokas from the Dhammapada and from the Yoga Sutras, so that we can sort of usher into our presence the ever-living Buddha and the never-dying Patanjali. These have no beginning, middle, and end. They are one soul. They are one with us, and they're beyond time. And we can call on them anytime we want, even from within time. We can call upon them, and they'll bring that timeless presence to us. So, with that said, we can enter into a more direct Dharma teaching, which we like to also call in our tradition Jnanam. Don't lock me out of my own material, please. And there you see on your left, on your right, on my left, that chart that was being mentioned last week about Ashtanga Marga and Ashtanga Yoga. So these are, Ashta means 8 in Sanskrit. And we are trying to bring these two systems side by side. So, of course, you've got in yoga and Vedanta the four great treasures, and you've got the four fruits and so forth. Just like in Buddhism, you have the Four Noble Truths. So there are some very powerful stand forth, be counted teachings in both Vedanta and yoga and in Buddhism that start with a fourfold reckoning like that. Uh, Again, sort of a sign of the times that Buddha, who, if we measure the Kali Yuga in terms of the thousands of years that it actually lasts, was living in the Kali Yuga with us. But beings like Patanjali were also living in the Kali Yuga with us. But beings like Krishna and Ram, they were living in other yugas. And in that way, then, there wasn't so much of a need to emphasize suffering. Suffering's always been here, but because in the Satya Yuga you have all your marbles, spiritually speaking. In the Satya Yuga, it's known as an age of light. So you haven't lost memory of your spirituality yet. You haven't, that rust hasn't set in. The Treta Yuga comes along. Treta means 3. It basically refers to 3 in Sanskrit. So, and then you've got the Avatar Ram coming on the scene and watching 1/4 or 1/3 of the spirituality and people born in that yuga lose the Dharma. So the Yuga Dharma is already beginning to disintegrate by the time the second avatar makes his appearance. Krishna comes in the 3rd Yuga and then 2/3 is gone. And then the 4th Yuga comes and there's nothing left. So it's not just some speculation or imagination that we're engaging in here. It's a philosophical truth that can be proved by the march of time if you just open your eyes and look at it. What a decline there has been of not only spirituality, but even religion has lost the way and has become conventional and fundamentalist, and not just in Christianity where we were born in this, but in Hinduism too. And so that's a darkened time. Kali means black. Of course, there's also Mother Kali, which is a whole other picture. But basically, that dark yuga where 100% of all remembrance of Brahman or Buddha nature and your identity with it has been forgotten. And so people are wandering around lost. Don't you know that all are lost here? Everyone lives in pallid imitation of everyone else, the scriptures of India say. So basically, to bring that back, sand off that rust from consciousness, from the metal of consciousness, you might say, then we look back to the old teachings, the ancient teachings, which are really actually, in other words, saying timeless teachings, so that we don't lead people to think that maybe that these Dharma teachings or this Jnanam or these great souls like Buddha and Patanjali ever were born, ever died, or ever are not ever present. They're just being veiled by the consciousness of the multitudes as they believe in such things as birth and death. We always chant that, for instance, when we want to bring that back. Namachor Nashanka, Name Jati Beda, Pita Naiva Me Naiva, Mata Majama, Chidananda Rupa, Shivoham, Shivoham. Chidananda Rupa Shivoham Shivoham By the great Advaitin Shankara in his 6 verses on Nirvana, Nirvana Shatkam. Another of the great non-dual luminaries who looked kindly and favorably towards Lord Buddha's teachings, although Buddhism had its fall too in India and had to be, and Shankara was the one who resurrected the Vedas and back into popularity. So all these comings and goings of different religious traditions and their founders are all a part of Maya, all a part of the changing, unreal, Krishna calls it. And as those changes go by, we seek to keep our third eye open. We keep to see these 2 eyes pure. And the eyes that I used in dream last night, 2 nights ago in my guru's ashram, I wanted to keep those pure so that I can see through the nadis. I can use that energy of spirituality that it took so long, so many lifetimes to remember, and is at risk of being totally forgotten through so many yugas and ages, so that I can use that again to have pure senses. 5 out here, 5 inside, and then this one, transcendent. And that's really what Ashtanga Yoga and Ashtangika Marga are talking about when they try and convince you that you need to keep up these practices called sadhana. Right? It's authentic sadhana when you bring together your practice and detachment from the unreal. It's like Jnana Yoga's supreme secret. That's why he called himself Vivekananda. See, when he came here. Viveka's discrimination between what abides and what changes all the time. He said that's what they need to know. So he was going to name himself after his teacher, Ramakrishnananda, before he left India for the Columbian Exposition called the Great Fair there that he came to in Chicago. But he decided, no, these people in the West, they need to hear this secret of discrimination or viveka, so that they can begin separating the wheat from the chaff, because that's the West heard of it from Jesus, that you had to actually make a distinction between your true self and where birds and foxes keep their holes and nests. You don't have a place to abide here. You're only sojourning. So, and even that sojourn is a matter of appearances coming and going, isn't it? Like your dreaming state last night and your deep sleep state that you go into, as how the non-dualists describe it in India. The 3 states of your consciousness, waking, dreaming, and deep sleep, Jagrat, Swapna, Sushupti. These words need to be brought back, just like you have to know the meaning of Ashta. So 2 eightfold systems side by side is a wonderful teaching. That's what we seek to try and bring forward today in a limited amount of time, no doubt. See what Lord Buddha says about that kind of teaching. He says, verily from yoga arises wisdom, whereas non-yoga brings loss of wisdom. Thus, give up the false way of decline and place yourself in the way of progress. For of paths, the eightfold is best. Of truths, the fourfold is best. Of states, detachment is best. And of men, the illumined ones are the best. I might as well just close shop right now, and let you all go home, because that's what I was trying to say in my long preamble. And that's from the Buddha himself. So in that way, we find out that um, Lord Buddha really does champion practice sadhana, as he was doing for his disciples, the Noble Eight, and before that, and after that, Shankara was doing for his maybe 14 monastic disciples that followed him. Prior to that, Christ had 12 apostles. And in this day and age, Ramakrishna has, and we have them on our shrine, and there are 16 direct disciples. So these great beings are coming back having practiced and mastered limbs of yoga. So yoga is the, premium word here, basically. First, it can just mean union. Second, it means practice, but you can't alienate one from the other. Therefore, you bring together your eight-limb practice with this realization of the fourfold truth, and open this single eye, and then come before the great souls, the luminaries, and in all humbleness and reverence. See, the wise approach the guru by prostration, by reasoning and asking questions, and by selfless service. Then they open the way towards non-dual realization. Then they'll give you the transmission of Brahman, which Buddha used in the Dhammapada all the time. Who's the real Brahmana? Who's the real Brahmana? Who is the real self? So Lord Buddha used these words that are kind of watchwords now all the time in the earliest of his own sayings. So you see there, if you really look closely, and we won't look that closely because of lack of time, what the Eightfold Path is all about and what the Eight Limbs of Yoga are all about. I'm going to treat this in a way that brings us to a maybe 5 or 10 minute conclusion at the end, so that we can see the Atman and the Tathagatagarbha. You might say these two words about absolute reality that were used in these different periods of India's darshanas, philosophical spiritual systems. Darshan means to see through a system. And bring those two together and see how they look straight across the board from one another. Eight limbs of yoga there. Under it, it says, receive, emulate, and practice. So this is going to take some self-effort. Eightfold Path, observe, implement, and adhere. It sounds a little bit more like Advaita Vedanta. Just observe the truth. You don't need to practice. So, of course, that's a very risky thing to say in the West to people who have fallen into darkness. But on the other hand, it's got to be an ultimate truth that we're all going to have to one day realize, that the truth always is, the untruth never will be. In fact, I was reading an article today written by one person in this room for our new issue of the journal that says that the unreal never is, the real never ceases to be. The truth of both has been realized by the seers. So it's not like they just went for the truth and forgot the non-truth, because a greater percentage of human beings, at least here in the Borloka on Earth, are living by the non-truth. And they don't know the first thing about truth, not even what to speak of non-dual truth, but just good old-fashioned truth, which doesn't fall into the category of my truth and your truth. It's just one truth for all of us. So this means the difference between practice and realization is brought here. If we all knew who we truly are, then we wouldn't have to do any practice, my teacher used to say. But what if we don't know who we truly are? And we're either in stages of trying to awaken to that, or we've forgotten entirely and we don't care. And it will take suffering we'll take the suffering just as long as we can get the pleasure. I mean, that's pretty much what people are feeling nowadays. They don't want religion, they don't want philosophy, and they're willing to put up with suffering, the first noble truth, if they even believe if they find out that that's the truth of the matter, so that they can get this insidious and unsatisfying pleasure out of objects and things, senses and objects. Remember, we just said the senses and the objects are gods. So we want to bring them back, honor them, observe them, and implement this worship of the gods back into everything. Not into just a ritualistic way that was a danger both in Patanjali's time and in Lord Buddha's time, but in a real way that recognizes that there's one Brahman here, there's one Buddha nature here, and it's indivisible, and it exists in all things, in all beings and all things. All pervasive is the nice word for that. If you looked at the 8 limbs of yoga and ran them down, then you'd see that first you've got niyamas. Well, there they are first. We can just show that to people watching. It's pretty much starts out with the yamas. Those are in this image depicted by roots. And you can see what they are. Ahimsa usually always starts out. You must be nonviolent in thought, word, and deed. Then you must be truthful, satya. You must have ashteya, brahmacharya, and aparigraha. You can see there. Don't take what doesn't belong to you. Don't covet the goods of others, they say. Because you might say, well, which one of these is the worst problem today? It's really hard to decide. Take your pick, But then you get to continence. That is storing up your power in yoga, right? Doesn't that the householders moderate, the monks celebrate. They don't celebrate so much. And then you have the non-receiving of gifts, which is a hard nut for a lot of people to swallow, especially last month at Christmas time, here in the West, that is. That's basically first limb, 5 roots of the tree of yoga. That's limb 1. It's called yamas. Yeah, interesting word because Yama is also the Lord of Death. So pretty much a lot of things die that are not worthy of holding when you practice the 5 limbs. Your violence would die, for instance. Your tendency to tell non-truths or to lie or to steal and so forth would actually die away. So you're doing the best possible thing for that. And you can, of course, go look at Footfalls of the Indian Rishis as one guest here today. Welcome to you both. Said at the beginning of the before we started class that there's this great big book of all these charts that you can get. Take a close look at all of these. Niyamas then have to do more with study. Basically, these are just things that everyone should have. And these are things that you can practice in order to keep these free of rust, if you will. And those are things like austerity, tapas, and swadhyaya, to study the scriptures, worship of Ishvara. In that case, in Buddhism, would of course be Buddha himself, the father of Buddhism. Their love and be devoted to Buddha, like they do in the Chinese Buddhist school. They have an ample amount of faith toward the personality of Buddha there in a very cautious way that Buddhism is well known for. Then Santosha's purity and Saucha's this, contentedness and Saucha's is purity. So that's a quick look at the first 2 limbs of yoga. It proceeds on then the branches, and the branches would be there. First one, asana, which is defined by different beings depending on their level of understanding of it. At the highest level, it's you would want to practice mental asanas. Physical asanas, they say just one. This one I'm in. That's good enough. And you don't need any more. If you sit like this and cross the legs and hold and deal with your breath, which is coming next, then Kundalini will start coming over time. Naturally, she'll start rising. And that's Kundalini is one of the secret esoteric systems of India. It's another yoga. We've got Jnana, Bhakti, Dhyan, Raja Yoga, and Karma Yoga. But there's this Kundalini like sneaks in, right? And then there's Kriya Yoga comes in, where Patanjali said about his own system, if you just take these 3 of all these 10, this will be enough for you. What is that? Austerity, that is, that'll get rid of the rust of monasteries and households, right? Your austerities you do every day. And study the scriptures and memorize them and have devotion to God. If you just take those 3, that'll be enough for you to reach the goal of human existence. So he took 8 of 8 limbs with 10 roots. He took 3 of these roots and said, do these if you're not able, because of time or capacity, to do the whole thing, like a Patanjali and his students might do. So that's called Kriya Yoga nowadays. I'm sorry, the Kriya Yoga nowadays does not teach it that way. I'm sorry. It's got all sorts of fantastic things. But that's where Kundalini comes in. That if you sit in one position and breathe right, that's about all you need to do. That's what they did 40 days and 40 nights in the desert. That's what they did 49 days under the bo tree. That's what they did out in the wilderness when they wanted to go get in touch with true nature, because the overall mindset of the masses and ignorance got to be too much for them. And so I've got to go and find the self again and make sure my connection with that Buddha nature, with that Brahman, with that Yahweh, with that Buddha, with that Brahman is absolutely free of any kind of blockages in the nadis. Through all of this, 100,000 nadis. Nadis are channels. Yeah. Sort of like your body has them. The earth has them, rivers, channels, water running through channels, blood running through nerves. But then inside, when you go to sleep tonight, you go into dream, you're actually going to heaven. Dream is heaven. There's no heaven up above you. And there's no heaven in your body. So the kingdoms of heaven are within you. So these heavens that you go into have connected, your consciousness runs along channels, and these are called nadis. There are hundreds and thousands of them running through your subtle body. Not your physical body. Those have a different kind of nervous system. But your subtle body, which conducts consciousness, which conducts intelligence, runs through your mind body. And that's why the mind is so important. That's why I said you can purify your body, you can purify your energy, but then start purifying this. It would be better if you started with this. Because if you started with this, all the rest of this would get pure automatically. That's the secret of the realized souls. They come to earth perfect, or near perfect, or with an assumption of being imperfect, to show you how to get perfect. They'll take on practice when they don't need to. They asked Shankara, why are you still worshiping your Guru slippers? Why are you still doing sadhana if you're perfect? He said, because I'm acting as, number one, I'm acting as an example for my students. And number two, I want to keep my mind pure so that I can see Brahman best of all. I want the best possible view of Brahman off the mirror of my mind that I can get. Right? So I keep my mind polished every day by sadhana. So that's why you put together this I am Atma Brahma with this I must practice all the time to retain memory of that fact. And then you've got an unbeatable combination. Like here, Ashtangika and Ashtanga. Unbeatable combination if you can put together these 2 yogas. Raja Yoga and Buddha Yoga, if you want to call it that. If you move on to the upper limbs then, along with asana, then you've got the fourth limb of breathing. Just like you sat, just like you brought the mind into balance first, called yoga, and then all of a sudden your prana and your body became healthy and everything started flowing again. In the same way, if you can breathe, then everything in your body will get healthy. The greatest elixir of all is called prana. The gods are addicted to prana. That's why they're coming back to be reborn as your ancestors, which is not necessarily a good thing in the Kali Yuga, as Buddha told. One of the things Buddha was here to do was to get India off of this problem of ancestor worship and do it in the right way. It had become old and tired and ritualistic, and it had forgotten all the greater truths in Buddhism. So ancestors had to be purified too. The gods had to be purified also. Most of these people are doing it ritualistic from the ground up, but he came to show how to do it from the top down or from the inside out. Realize your perfect nature first, everything else will follow. So that's the way you have to present the 8 limbs of yoga, is that you could have started in Nirvikalpa Samadhi like the avatars did, come here and shown everyone how to do a practice in the right way. How do you do a practice in the right way? By knowing you're already perfect. That's where you get this absence of the contradiction between people today who are saying you don't need to practice because you're already perfect. No, you're perfect, so you need to practice, is how you put that in Vedanta. Because then you can always remember that you are perfect and you won't get caught off guard by all of the krantis and the nadis, right? Blockages in these passageways. Not only just in you if you don't have them, but in the people around you, to where you're going to have to go off into the wilderness, come back 40 days later, say, I am the light of the world. He wasn't saying that before he left. See, he was saying, get me away from these people, the Romans, the Pharisees, everyone, get me away from them. Just like Buddha was getting away from everything, his rich family and so forth, and Ram too, when he left his king. And with his father, the king Dasaratha and the Kosala kingdom, it was all like this, let's isolate. In India, that was known very early on as Kaivalya, teach yourself free of nature. And that teaching just got forgotten. And everybody began to grab onto everything of nature, right? Nowadays, this nature is all there is, called matter for the scientists. It's called pleasure for the worldly people. See? So they're convinced that nature is all there is and that that's going to give them all good things. But it's also inherent in it, the first noble truth, you see, suffering. Suffering is there in nature. And it's not there in the Atman. It's not there in your Buddha nature. That's free of suffering, which you have to prove to yourself by realizing it and living in it for a while. Where did my suffering go? One of the great poet saints of India is saying that. I woke up one day and my delusion was gone, utterly gone. He had been practicing Ashtanga Yoga and hearing the Ashtanga Marga all his life because he lived in India. And then they asked, well, how did that happen? And he said, well, only thing I can say is you can't keep a blazing fire tied in a cotton cloth. So nobody can do that. See? So this fire of illumination is just going to burn through everything. So you want to see that light and then be that light. Remember that you are that light. And that would be starting at the Asampragyata. And that's how the avatars come in. They have to make it look different because we would never believe them. But if they take on suffering, if they get poisoned, if they get crucified, if they get shot in the heel with an arrow and die from infection, which is 3 avatars I can think of right now and how they died, then we will have empathy for the fact that they came to us in a physical body and showed us how to transcend nature. Kaivalya, one of the most beautiful words in Sanskrit, one of the earliest words I ever learned and got attracted to. Isolation from nature, which is the form-producing machine, right? And you're not a form. So how did Patanjali put that in his 8-limb system? Why did he put together an 8-limb tree for us in about 140 AD? He said, because the seer has become attached to the seen. That's how he put it. That's the best English in Sanskrit you can put. The seer has become attached to the seen. And then that's backwards. the seer should be the master of the scene. Nature should be your servant. But look what's happened to nature. It's our slave, not our servant nowadays. So because the gods are not there in it anymore. When we took out all the resources to satisfy the senses, then we forgot that there were gods in those senses. And there were also gods in the five elements. And that they would become imbalanced if we did that. And might as well have a description for the Kali Yuga right there. It's like happens every time. Since there's no middle, beginning, and end to anything, everything is the ultimate truth. No matter what Indian philosophy you look into, everything is sarvosmi. It's like one word. And since that's the fact of things, that existence is, then that deviation from that fact is causing people to believe in diversity, duality, multiplicity, and everything else that comes from the loss of that higher vision that you get. So if you have to practice 8 limbs forward, you get to the pranayama. This just isn't about just huffing and puffing your lungs like a pair of billows and getting dizzy and calling it samadhi. That's not what Father Vieux meant. He meant that you breathe, and the in-breath is, yeah, well, you're jumping to the Advaitic chase there, but basically it's you breathe in, and that's a waking state. You hold, and that's dreaming state, and you breathe out, and that's deep sleep state, right? So every breath, you're going through the 3 levels of your consciousness. You're waking, tonight you're dreaming, then you're going into deep sleep, and everything goes back to seeds. Then you come back through dreaming, maybe, or you just wake right up into the waking state. And all the time, Turiya, the 4th state, is surrounding that and never gets realized by your journeying through these 3 realms of waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. So your breath is mother's way of telling you, I would say, to wake up to that fact, that you have places to go along the nadis. And you should be conscious of your so-called movements through these worlds until the worlds no longer exist for you, because Kaivalya will take you over. You'll realize the worlds were a dream of the gods. They were your dream. And God didn't create the worlds, you did. And that's one of the differences between Eastern religion and Western, or Middle Eastern, Western religion, is that we believe in God, a creator God here. But they believe in the mind as the God, as the projector of everything. The mind creates everything. That's called mind-only schools. It's a beautiful thing to come to understand and to study. So this breathing then, as one of us here said, if you breathe in, you're supposed to say, I am Brahman. If you hold the breath, you're supposed to say, I will always be Brahman. And if you breathe out, you're supposed to say, I'm not the world. So whatever way you do it in, Kriya style or meditation style, pranayama style in yoga, these are great teachings that you then lend much more of your own consciousness to the limb of pranayama. It's not just an exercise you do and walk away and say, oh, maybe I'm getting healthier, because the body is never going to be healthy. Not ultimately. This body is what you want to make healthy, because this is the passage to Brahman, not this. So if you make this healthy, everything outward and everything inward will become perfect in its health. That's called a spiritual immune system, if you want. People are so up about physical immune systems now, as if the body's going to live forever, or disease is somehow not going to come. So what happened to the first noble truth? That you can't get rid of that suffering, and that's going to be there. And in fact, it trades off with pleasure, equal amounts. Equal amounts. That's why people have horrible things happen to them, because they had so much pleasure stored up for so long that they had somehow kept the painful thing from happening to them. So then all of a sudden the painful thing comes forward. Guess what? Your loved one died. And it's all pain and equal recompense to the pleasure that you created for it. So what do the yogis do with this mind and its tendencies for sankalpa? They just let those bubbles rise. But every day they dissolve them back in to the source of the mind, which is the ignorance from which it came. So that means when they go into waking, dreaming, and deep sleep, they're evening out the karma that causes pleasure and pain, evening it out. So they don't store it up anymore. What did Vivekananda say? Strike off thy fetters, bonds that bind thee down, of shining gold or darker baser ore. No slave is slave caressed or whipped, not free, for fetters so of gold are not less strong to bind. So off with him, sannyasin bowl. Say Om Tat Sat Om. So the gold chains of good karma are as hard to break as the iron chains of negative karma. They're not as strong, but they're hard to break because you get attached to those gold chains and you don't want to break them. So nobody wants to get free. They just want to get more pleasure. And this is the problem with I'm quoting the ancient Indian scriptures, the heaven aspiring senses. We found a way to worship the gods. Then when we appeased the gods and they gave us everything from the three worlds that we wanted, we realized that we were under their control and we wanted to go beyond heaven. Nobody in any religion, in any world, in any country has ever said that they needed to get beyond nature and they needed to get beyond the gods. So if you didn't only believed in one of them, or if you believed that the two were connected and there were two of them, fine. But nobody ever said, I want to get beyond them both. I'm not a merchant. I'm not a god. I'm not a worker. I'm not a mendicant. I could sing that verse that I just sang. In fact, I sang that, but I didn't really translate it for you, did I? Basically, it's um, um, I have no death because never a birth had I. I have no father and I have no mother. See, these are the first lines of his sixth verse of the Nirvana Shatkam. So the beautiful thing about it is, someone says, well, when were you born? I never had a birth. I never have a death. So that's namritur, no death. Name jati, birth, veda, no difference. There's no difference between birth and death. They're both equally unreal. I never had them because my Atman's never born, it never dies. You're talking about the body. Get over it. Holy Mother used to say, what's all this fuss about the body, which is just 8 ounces of dust in the end? And then after that, she'd say, forget your personality. Realize your true self. And this is my teacher's teacher, here now with us in the form of Divine Mother, as the very thoughts that we're having right now, and the very power to understand those thoughts at a deeper level. That's her, quick as lightning, faster than that. So basically, you have these first 4 limbs of yoga. The Upanishads start you at pranayama and talk about higher understanding. You had a lifetime where maybe you didn't have nirvikalpa samadhi, or you didn't reach bodhisattvahood, or you didn't become a jivan mukta, a living liberated soul. So you come back with all of this stored up spirituality from a past lifetime, and you can use it, right? Hopefully, you're not born in too dark an age where people are going to keep you, get in the way from realizing. But basically, you come back with that. So you come back at the level of, here, take a breath. And as soon as you breathe, you remember that. As soon as you sit like this, you remember that. Right? That's what I'm talking about, the beauty and naturalness of asana and pranayama, rather than the way the hatha yogis are teaching it. You just sit like this, like I did when I was young, and I felt good. I didn't feel like an American Indian sitting like this because I sat like that. I felt like a yogi. and immediately began to attract to myself those people who were in my previous lifetimes, who were yogis and who had mastered limbs like this. And it's a very quick process. Didn't go to any false gurus, didn't have any run-ins with ancestors, uh, didn't have any desire for money and fame. See, all those things that you usually hear about, gone, right? So you come back, and so that's why you want to attain something in this lifetime. As high a limb as you can climb to get the best view, you want that. And if you don't reach the goal, no problem. Maybe she doesn't want you to reach the goal yet because you still have other fish to fry. You see, you have other people to help. Many people are like that. So it's not like this, I must reach the highest goal or bust. There's a whole, just get beyond. Well, put it this way, there's a tree of samsara out there in the jungle. You want to climb off that and climb up this tree. You see, as long as you're off the tree of samsara, because Shankara describes those 8 limbs very profoundly in the Vivekachudamani, as long as you've gotten off the tree of samsara and you've gotten on the tree of practice, then you might as well be free. You're beginning to remember your inherent freedom. And it comes back to you just like a familiar taste when you're young. If it doesn't, then, you take your children and you put them at the feet of a good teacher as quick as you can and have them learn the Dharma because maybe they haven't had a lifetime in Dharma yet. I mean, if they're American European souls, so to speak, then that's several thousand years of no Dharma. And maybe they only got some religion and they're still coming back, so they didn't get released yet, did they? Not into nirvana, not into moksha, not into mukti, not into even kaivalya, not into asampragyata, not into satori, not into formlessness, not into non-duality. Well, these are words that we use when we climb the higher limbs. If you just, like Buddha said, become a master of phonetics. Nobody realizes that. One of the first things he said was that you have to study. When we went to the swamis of the Ramakrishna order when we were young, and we wanted to become monks, said, well, how far along are you in school? Would be the first question. See, well, I'm about ready, to enter college, or I'm in the second, third year of college. Get your degree first. So if you weren't born for a monastic vocation, you went there out of yearning, and you were just attracted right away to that situation, then you had some other ways of finding your way. And they wanted to support that. They didn't want you to break out something that you were doing that could be helpful to people and just become monks and walk away in a kind of selfish monasticism that happens. So it's, oh no, finish your college, then come back and see me. If women came to Sri Ramakrishna just pregnant, I want to learn yoga. He said, go have your child first, then come back to me with your child. You have something to do first. That's your yoga. Your child's your yoga. So anyway, these are ways of approaching these upper limbs that might have already been done before by many of us. That's why it's so familiar to us. The 5th limb, then, of course, is the hardest of all limbs today. It's pratyahara. It means withdrawing the mind from the senses, basically. That's a good basic. I can't control my mind yet. It's still running after things when it should only be focused on Brahman, on my enlightenment. So I haven't got that pure mind yet that seeks only the highest. I've got a little light, but it's mixed in with some of the darkness of the world. I've got some sattva, but it's mixed in with rajas and tamas. See, I'm still restless, and I'm still prone to dark thoughts, and so forth. So the rust of consciousness, right, has gotten into you, and you want to then shave that off. So you go and you practice pratyahara. From pratyahara, if you can master that limb, and a lot of people fall back from the limbs of yoga there. But if you can master that 5th limb, then you've got the 6th limb of dharana. Now I can concentrate. The game of Maya is over as soon as you can concentrate. And you can get yourself up and out of darkness if you can concentrate the mind, even if you don't believe in God. Because they say beings like Kapila, maybe even Patanjali, the father of yoga, Lord Buddha, they didn't really necessarily believe in God. That wasn't their emphasis. They just said, follow this yoga and you'll understand what God is when it comes to you. They weren't going to try and show you anything about that divine reality that was indescribable anyway early. They wanted you to find it. So that's why this is very important that concentration be there. You might as well say concentration is really in accordance with these throat and third eye chakras. See, Vishuddha, most pure, Agya, third, the wisdom. I'm most certain that God exists. And I want the wisdom that proves it. I want the vision. So that's two of the higher of the seven chakras or lokas or um, lotuses, or put it that way. So basically, that's in accord with this, and I'm sort of already putting them across the board with each other. Systems like Buddhism and yoga and Kundalini and how it runs through them. And we'll look at that as a comparison after we check out this seventh and eighth limb, which is Zen meditation, dhyan, and samadhi, which is nirvana in Buddhism. So dhyan is meditation. There are a lot of people trying to meditate before they can concentrate. And they're trying to concentrate before they've mastered their minds in pratyahara. So you can see how Father of Yoga was really completely supporting Lord Buddha's system of Ashtanga Yoga. Ashtanga Marga. He was completely in support of that. He was so positive about Lord Buddha's presence 700 or so years before he took that incarnation that he's kind of giving you a step-by-step of how to come to that higher realization that the Buddha is so famous for. So those are the 8 limbs of yoga. And, here's the 10 yamas. You can look at it in the book. Basically, you want to have these things defined for you by the father of yoga, and some of these are by the father of Vedanta too. And then you can become a master of philosophical phonetics, if you want to put it that way. So please look at that also. It's got the same image, but it takes apart the 10 roots of yoga, which is ahimsa and sabcham and asteya and brahmacharya and all of those we looked at in the other chart. Now, let's look over at we looked at the 8 limbs briefly, and now let's look at these 8 Ashtanga Marga, which is an old warhorse chart that what number it is back here, but out of some 450 charts now, this is back like 123. So I was looking at it and making sure that we had it with us in our classes in SRV. The Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. Recognition of the Four Noble Truths equals spiritual awakening. Non-recognition equals ignorance. That's Lord Buddha and the Dhammapada again. So if, that's one of the things we're kind of sometimes misled about is that we come into life and we celebrate. And they try and get us to celebrate our birthdays, which are not real. And they try and get us to look away from our death, which is coming. And, that's why in India we celebrate Mahanirvana, the death days, and Mahasamadhi, the times when they leave the body and get free and have left us all this wealth of teachings behind. We tend to look towards that. Then with birth, we say, well, may it be a more conscious birth. If you're going to take it, may it be more and more conscious. May you learn all of this Dharma and come back with Dharmic parents, which in the Kali Yuga is not going to be that easy. remember asking one of my students early on, what do you want, if you have to come back to be reborn? Dharmic parents was his immediate answer, because he didn't, and most of us didn't have them here. We could have had moral parents, we could have had loving parents, we didn't have dharmic parents. And what do we need that for? Because the Buddha says the main truth here is dukkha, basically. And you might as well say sukha dukkha. That's how India puts it. Basically, it's happiness and sorrow, or pleasure and pain. It's one of the primal dualities that people get attached to here. And that's raga dvesha here in yoga, right? It's two of the five kleshas or impediments. They're called kileshas in Buddhism, but the kleshas in yoga are egotism, ignorance, attachment, aversion, and clinging to life or fear of death. Because you can't fear death because you were never born, as we just said. If you're fearing death, then you're not thinking right. So two of those kleshas are attachment and aversion. That's like pleasure and pain, right? So you want to sidestep those. Those are, by father of yoga, father of Vedanta called those five hells. Tan Mishra, he called them, dark hells. So if you're under the press of those, then the Dharma is, you're far from even hearing the Dharma and believing in it yet. So dukkha is, like Holy Mother said, the suffering of this world has gotten into the very marrow of my bones. See? The suffering of this world has gotten into the very marrow of my bones, she said. So she didn't, come off saying, celebrate life, let's have fun. See? In fact, she said, the master and I didn't come here to have fun. We come here to save you from this state of embodiment. Birth and death are very painful. May you never have to come back here again. You don't hear the gurus today saying that. And so this is a wake-up call. This is a dash of cold water in the face, or a slap by the Lord Buddha himself. Say that everything here is riddled through and through with suffering. And it's just that you have to realize that sukha dukkha, is probably a more full way of putting this teaching, is that suffering and pleasure are one and the same. They trade off. That's one teaching. The other is that, suffering is a kind of pain to the illumined. I'm sorry, put it the other way. Pleasure is a kind of pain to the illumined. It becomes insidious to them. And that's happening to people out here in the world. They're not getting satisfying by satiating the senses, so they become depressed. So they don't have the intelligence of the Buddhas and the people like that to say, oh, maybe it's because they can't satisfy me. So my teacher used to give a lecture all the time, once a year. Satiation never comes. I remember sitting at his lecture several times over the time I knew him. Satiation never comes. He would look at us as householders, Americans out there in the congregation, telling us this. That he was a monk for 90 years, and he had gone beyond that stuff, but he was trying to convince Americans that that's why you're getting depressed, and that's why you're getting unhappy, and that's why you don't have peace anymore. Peace of mind has been lost because you're coveting this temporal happiness that comes with, back to yoga, with the attachment of the seer to the seen, or the senses to the objects. Everyone in this room, I'm preaching to the choir, but basically dukkha is consisting of sorrow, lamentation. So those two I just talked about already. And pain itself with pleasure, and grief and despair. Those are the things that are going around in our culture right now. And this is going around in the culture that has all the money they need. This is going around in a culture that has all the children they need, all the houses they need, all the food they need. And so what's the conclusion to come to? See, those are called the five aggregates. So it's just taking apart the First Noble Truth. You might say, well, I know the First Noble Truth, but you know what? It's the cause of the First Noble Truth. And then he goes on, samudaya, due to craving, desire. I just pretty much covered that. It's the truth of the origin of suffering. It's not a satisfying way for me to hear that because there's no origin to anything really. But it's the truth of the apparent origin of suffering because suffering doesn't really have any foundation to rest upon. It's like, you know, it's like back to who can tie a blazing fire in a cotton cloth. What's really here is bliss. And that's what you don't hear when you hear about the Four Noble Truths or the practice of the eight limbs. You're already that. Celebrate it. Celebrate Brahman. Don't celebrate the world. Celebrate the birthless, deathless Atman, not the world of suffering that goes through birth and death all the time. You just shift the thing here, shift the focus over to the real from the unreal. That's why we like Vedanta and the wheat and the chaff teaching, because our orientation is wrong. Well, what if we were to look at Ashtanga Marga? The first thing Buddha wants you to do is have that orientation. And the way they teach these Eightfold Path, because you can look at the rest of the Four Noble Truths, there's an origin of suffering, there's a truth to its cessation, and there's an Eightfold Path. So the Eightfold Path starts with Samyak Darshana, or Samyak Drishti. Drishti means view. So you have a perfect view about things. Remember back when I was just talking about, focusing on the body and focusing on the breath? I didn't have a perfect view of those. So I thought that somehow I could get enlightened by Hatha Yoga, or somehow by pranayama I would get enlightened. That's not the perfect view. That's exactly what Buddha's talking about in the Ashtanga Marga. The Ashtanga Yoga is talking about the same thing with Patanjali. Those things will never be perfect. Those are the imperfections that you want to get behind thee. Christ said that. Get thee behind me, right? Those are those things that you want to drop. You have to know what to let go of and what to keep. And people aren't letting go of the right things and not seeking the right things either. They don't have that discrimination yet. That's why they suffer. So direct insight into the Dharma, knowledge of the unity of all existence. Does that sound like suffering to you? Knowledge of the unity of all existence. If you saw the seers who were realized and they were always in a state of harmony and unity, they wouldn't be crying and weeping about the world. Ask the Jews, basically doing a great article from a rabbi for an interview for the Nectar magazine, and how the Jews think about Auschwitz and how they think about um, um, the idea that God treated them wrong and that they're angry at God and all this. But everyone else is coming up to them saying, "Wow, you Jews are really spiritual people. How did you get that way?" If you look at Buddhist temples, if you look at Vedanta centers, if you look at Baha'i organization, if you look at all these places, the Jews are gathering there because teachers are coming from other religions. So if you look at the whole sweep of Middle Eastern religion, Abraham to Moses to Jesus to Muhammad, if you look at that sweep, you're finding out that the Jews are the universal ones. They're the ones that have this no problem with going to other religions and learning from them. Sure, there's the Hasids and there's more fundamentalists. Every religion has those, but basically, these rabbis and these rebbes are waking up to this fact that you can't teach the great Jewish teachings if you're angry with God. So we need other teachers to come and teach us to help get us back on the track. And so that's what's happening. That's why they're going to the Zen monasteries and practicing Zazen. And that's why they're going to swamis and trying to get the Vedanta straight, the cosmology straight, and so forth. So all of this has to do with perfect view, but look at how it's put as a third stage in your evolution. I think that's a beautiful, ingenious thing about the Eightfold Path is that the third comes first. And I always wondered about that and thought about it and then finally saw the real genius of it all. Basically, if you have that, it's what I was talking about earlier. If you have that wisdom at the time of your death, so-called death, then you come back in birth already with pragya, right? It means a little bit different in Buddhism than it does in Vedanta. Don't worry about that. But basically, that wisdom, you bring it back with you and you have the perfect view. That's why some people go straight to their gurus. They don't mess around with these pseudo gurus and get misled. There's a lot of us that can confess to that. It's basically, I didn't have any problem with any of that spiritual materialism, right? Because it took them several decades when I was practicing for Trungpa to come along and put out a book called Spiritual Materialism. Getting beyond it, they had first realized that it was upon them. And they were having the wool pulled over their eyes by these pseudo-gurus, that not just from India, but from Christianity and other places too. Then all of a sudden, it's coined, right? The problem is coined, and you're saying, boy, Mother, thank you for never getting me involved in that in the first place. You know, I escaped that fire, you know. And so, I mean, that's just not, you know, an admittance of being lucky or fortunate. It's a proclamation that you practiced in a last lifetime. We're not teaching that in our schools in the West, past lifetimes. So, and there's no dharma in the schools, basically. And in your parents either, you know, unless they happen to get lucky, it's like that. So basically, this is coming into life, you know, with this third stage already available to you in the fact that you have a perfect view already. You know, it keeps you safe. It's just a spiritual immune system already in place when you come. And, you know, you don't run afoul of things anymore with your family, with your ancestors, with the gods, with your karma. Everything can then just be successfully annulled. And when you climb the eighth flame of yoga, you won't have problem with pratyahara. I can't concentrate my mind. First time I heard about God in my 20s, my mind was concentrated. Because the first time I heard about it, right? That's what I wanted. Why didn't anyone tell me that before? See, so what happens to a person like that? The same thing happened to our founder, Lex Hixon. We used to talk about it. It's like, that galvanized me. That brought me up short. I didn't need the slap in the face of suffering is. What I really wanted was this perfect view. And yet it's the third stage of what happens to most people. They get it later in this Maya, in this samsara, in this karma-laden, pain-bearing life that they have. If they get it at all through effort, like practicing asanas and pranayama and mental exercises and so forth, they'll get it later, but it should come first. That's what they're saying. Samyak drishti, perfect view, should be right upon you as soon as you're born. That's a seer. That's a luminary. That's a father of yoga and a father of Buddhism right there. Second, I mean, these need long explication to bring this dharma home. So samyak sankalpa, be perfect resolve, because there are so many samkalpas that are based in imagination. The word's called vikalpa, and the world's full of vikalpa right now. Try and go see a movie. And it's just all imagination about things that nobody knows anything about. Like somehow our destiny is out in outer space, you know, and the gods in inner space are like waiting for us to come back, and we're going out, polluting the air, living in fantasy. That's sankalpa, and it's actually vikalpa. When it comes down to sankalpa, then you can actually use that sankalpa, creative imagining. You can actually use it for a better purpose. And that's what Lord Buddha means when he says samyak sankalpa. You can have perfect sankalpa. That is, I imagine all of this is a fantasy. Now I envision, I trade in my imaginations for my visions. Like my teacher used to say something like that. You know, yesterday's imagination is today's vision. today's vision is tomorrow's realization. He would say something like that, to lead us on toward that, back to that perfect view, right? So you put perfect view together with the mind's right thinking, and you've got this pragya, you've got this wisdom insight. And so they throw stage 3 at you first as if, isn't it kind of like saying you're already perfect? Right? So that's, again, makes sense out of this dangerous, risky thing you sometimes say to people in the West. You're the perfect Atman, you see, because Vivekananda didn't shirk back from saying that. He came here and said, don't you know that you're just God walking around on 2 legs? And people, including Christian priests, were like stunned at hearing this. Later on, he said, when I told that to the Christian priests, they began running to change what they said in their Bible based on the truth that they heard from me. So you had to hear it from a far different country, from a person who was a sannyasin, who was already free. You couldn't hear it in conventional religion. Couldn't hear it from the ancestors because they never practiced it. And you couldn't hear it from parents because the ancestors never passed it to them, right? It's got to be passed on like it does from Shiva to Shakti and Shakti to family. Back at the first stage, Shila, it kind of means moral. Sometimes I'll name my students Sheila if they're women, but I'll spell it with an I. You've got great moral content in you, basically. Samyak Vak, perfect speech. Samyak Karmanta, perfect conduct. Karma is the key word there. Samyak Ajiva, get perfect livelihood. And Samyak Vyayama, perfect effort. All of these make up this first stage of the Eightfold Path. So if you're just looking at it practically, you'd want to probably look at that first and then have this in mind. That's, I think, again, one of the main points about the Eightfold Path. Ashtangika Marga. Marga means a pathway, like a darshana in India. So, you come in here and if your teacher or your parents were dharmically oriented and they had understood the teachings from their gurus, right, I want to teach you this, but remember, my son, my dear, my darling, my child, remember that this is all based on the fact that your soul is eternally perfect. You can't start off calling people a sinner. When Vivekananda heard that, he said, liable. It's the worst sin to call another a sinner. Haven't you grown out of that yet? This is things he said to people when he came west. So why we love this great soul. I won't go into the details. Again, it's in the Footfalls book if you want to look back on it, but we are having to go through this stage 2 next. Samyak Smriti. One of my favorites is if you can remember your divine nature, that's more than half the battle. Everything will come running back to you then. It's one thing, of course, to have it when you first come, but that's not always practical in Maya. Sometimes I think the seers run a race. Look at the Boer local down there, how they're suffering. Shall we go down? Oh, all right, I'll go once more, you see. And then say, okay, I'll bet you I can awaken faster than you can. And what age are you going to incarnate in? Well, I'm the Buddha. I think I'll come, in the Kali Yuga. Well, I'm Krishna. I think I'll come in the Dvapara Yuga. I'm Shankara. I'm coming at the end of the Kali Yuga. And so Shankara gets in a race with others, who can awaken first. So in Shankara, he wakes up at 8 years old. And how does he wake up? By remembering everything that he learned in his past lifetimes. So he's not only an avatar of Shiva, he wrote 15 or 20 scriptures. Now, who does that in a modern age? Who writes scriptures? That's for the old folk, right? We look back to them. But here's current. I mean, he lived what, 700 AD? And he was the student of the father of yoga in its next incarnation. So that's just how Ashtangika Yoga and Ashtangika Marga get put together, that they taught each other. One wasn't a Buddhist and one wasn't a Vedantist or a yogi. They were both yogis. And they were both Hindus. And they both shared the teachings. They just look different at different ages for different people. So this gets proven by the birth of Patanjali as Shankara's guru, the father of yoga, 650 years after he composed the eight-limb system, showed up as the guru of the father of Advaita Vedanta, Shankara, with Gaudapada being the grandfather. So you look at that history, only known if you can look into rebirth and believe in it. But to believe in it, think it's the only thing in relativity that's worth pursuing. Then that becomes clear to you, and it's really, really marvelous. So this Shankara woke up at 8, and he remembered all the teachings, and he found his guru at 10, and he was wondering at 12. He was writing commentaries on things like the Brahma Sutras, which are just like so abstruse. When he was in his early 20s, he was commenting on the Upanishads, 10 or 12 of them, as he moves through his 20s. It's amazing. He'd probably like, I woke up first, went back and visited all the other sages and saints, because that's the way to do it. But more than that, of course, is kind of comedy sketch kind of thing. Basically, is that it proves that this happens. And it is the way that these beings come in with perfect view, right? And with perfect resolve to transmit that view to others. That's the real compassion to me. I like love. I think love trumps compassion. So Vedanta thinks that way. So that's real love, that Shankara would take it upon himself to come back. And so would Buddha, and so would Patanjali, these great fathers of these systems, take on a body. I mean, Shankara lived to 32, right? Born in the Kali Yuga, illumined by 8, writing his commentaries in his 20s, and passed by 32. So this is just like all condensed down. And it was like, okay, Buddha came and showed us how to do it. Then Shankara came and did it. So anyway, these are all interconnected. Finally, the 8th of the stage 2 actually is perfect concentration. So that's where we can segue here for a few minutes to looking at the cross the board chart. This is not in Footfalls because it's brand new. I did this just recently. If you were to put the Ashtanga Marga 8-fold pathway side by side with the 8 limbs of yoga, it would look like that. Samyak Drishti, this perfect view, is what you get when you practice the 5 yamas. You see, if I'm violent, I need to be nonviolent again. If I'm untruthful, I need to be truthful. If I'm taking the goods of others, like is happening so much around everywhere in politics and countries and so forth, taking resources from others, then I need to neutralize that and have a better view about everything. So basically, the 5 yamas are supposed to help you control your mind's thoughts. So you look back here, see, and see, was yama ahimsa. When the yogi establishes himself in ahimsa, hostilities from all other quarters cease. So if the yogi or the yogini, puts himself in this perfect view of, I will not harm anything in thought, word, and deed. I mean, best illustrated by the Tirthankaras. You know who the Tirthankaras were? They were the Jains. The Jains were 24 of them before Buddha. So I think Jainism turned into Buddhism, and I think Buddha was the 25th Tirthankara after Mahavir. Mahavir was the 24th. So Jainism just had run its course as Jainism, and Buddhism started right then. And that was the nonviolence that came through. The only country, the only religion that's nonviolent comes from India. Not nowadays because it's the Kali Yuga, They sailed a battleship into my bay out here with flying a Hindu flag. I couldn't believe it. Go away. Anyway, um, that's how you put across the board this perfect view with what the five yamas bring you. As far as perfect resolve, that goes with these niyamas. Purge the mind of desire and passions. So you put your mind on worship of God, bhakti yoga. You put your mind on tapas, austerity yoga, tapo yoga if you want, or advaya tapas. Remember we studied that as one of the Upanishads teaches that. And also um, study those scriptures. And this is where the Jnana Yoga or the Dharma comes in, that we want to memorize. Recall it, memorize it. Shankara brought it back 8 years old. That's a powerful memory. So all beings pass through the curtain of nescience when they die. And they come back to birth, they pass through it again. It wipes their minds clear of any memory of God, any memory of their past lifetime. Ever heard that teaching? Lord Shiva says about the curtain of nescience people go through after they die. The Buddhists would call it a bardo, Tibetans. So basically you pass through that and it strips your mind. And when you come back through it again, you come back with fear, doubt, and brooding. Talk about the five aggregates. Let me flip them back here and see what the five aggregates of pain, of suffering are. Here's the three aggregates of the curtain of nescience that you are subject to when you come back into a body, if you're not already availed of a perfect view, right? And have this wisdom already with you, like if your parents didn't give it to you. I mean, Shankara's mother, Hindu woman, dharmic, pious, didn't want to become a monk, you know. In Tibet, they're giving away Dalai Lamas when they're babies. See, it's like Christ said, these children are not your own. So why are we, selfish? That's back to asteya, isn't it? That we're coveting the goods of others, but we're not giving away to others what we have. At the same time, it's a two-way street. It should be the same with your children. It should be giving them not for the good of society, for the good of the Dharma. The good of society, where did that ever get you? But back to the First Noble Truth. All right, so then perfect conduct, put that across, or no, we want perfect speech yet. That goes really nicely across the way with stilling the mind's distractions. So speech, listening, hearing, listening to Om and meditation, all of these connect from inside out with vibrations. And those vibrations can cause this karmanta to happen. They can cause this suffering that comes next to happen. So if you put together asana with pranayama as a practice in the right way, based on what? That non-dual realization that thou art always a perfect Buddha nature. Buddha nature is perfect and you are that. It's not like Buddha nature is perfect and I'm going to gain it in the future. No, that's a post-mortem emancipation way of thinking. That's why the Middle Eastern religions never discovered moksha. See, absolute liberation. It's because they were thinking that way. They were thinking God is the creator and they were thinking that I'll get perfect in the future. Vedantists don't believe in post-mortem emancipation. We know that perfection is right now, and so did the Buddha. That is the perfect view to have. Thank you for listening a few extra minutes as we finish up this comparison. Basically, then next would be the pranayama breathing. That's uncover and neutralize all your karmas. So as you breathe, the nadis are opening up. The consciousness is going in. Your dreams begin to become what they used to call in the 80s lucid. And you're beginning to have spiritual experiences come upon you. Slowly first, little at a time. Don't get distracted by them. Both the fathers say, don't get attached to the visions. Just let them come and go. Let them rise and fall. and keep your mind on the ultimate truth. And keep that always in view and in mind. And that breathing process will even out two things. One, the ill health of your body. Two, the restlessness of your mind. See how beautiful that is when you breathe properly. You even, it's called, in yoga, it's called puraka, right? Breathe in, then you hold. That's called kumbhaka. It's kind of samadhi. Then you breathe out, rechaka. See? Don't forget there's another kumbhaka at the end when you breathe out. Don't just jam your lungs again with air. Hold in, breathe in, hold, breathe out, hold. So they teach it three-way breath. It's a four-way breath. And don't forget the kumbhaka, because that's what you get in meditation when you're not thinking anymore. Is kumbhaka. And that's what you get in deep sleep when the ego's gone. Kumbhaka. You want that cessation of all vibrations, cessation of all thoughts, cessation of the movement of energy through the nerves, cessation of transmigration from earth to heaven to hell. You want that cessation. You see the beauty of it? That's nothingness, if you want to give it a fatter definition. That's formlessness. That's the real shunyata, you see. And that will lead you to nirvana and nirvikalpa if you practice it. So you see how important the breathing exercise is across the board, from this perfect speech and perfect conduct. All right, so as we draw to the end here, we used to take a break and go another hour, so I'm following the old ways here. Samyak ajiva, perfect livelihood, goes across with this: dissolve the mind's limiting impressions. So what is it then that distracts us away from yoga and daily life? Work. You can't get enlightenment even through 100,000 acts, Sankara said, the one who woke up at 8. Through 100,000 actions, you'll never get enlightenment through action. So work is causing us distraction. Distraction from what? Away from God. So it's the rust of households. Buddha knew that. Otherwise, he wouldn't have put it in the Dhammapada. So what do? You come back and you do your practices, like the 8 limbs of yoga, or observance of the Ashtanga Marga, based on the fact, number one, that all this world is suffering. Number two, that I am perfect. See the beauty of it? I am Brahman, but the world's full of suffering. It's a 2-part teaching, not just a single teaching. That's why you want to put together what Lord Buddha composed and what Patanjali composed. They might as well be the same being. So you dissolve the mind's impressions then by coming back from work and remembering God in your practice, in your meditation, in your study, in all the yamas and niyamas, right? I mean, remember, we're just not putting these across the board and forget the ones we just looked at, right? You have to hold more than one ideal here. You have to hold more than one teaching. You have to practice more than one yoga, and you probably do. Your temperament is based on one yoga, but your practice should be based on at least 4. And that's how you expand the mind's capacity to know Brahman. Brahman doesn't expand, contract, but your mind can expand to know that. So that's the beauty of turning your work into worship, right? Right livelihood. That's how Swamiji put it. So Vivekananda comes along after Buddha, after Patanjali, does his commentary on both of them, and gives us these English words. Turn your work into worship, and just consummates and concentrates at least 2,000 years, 2,550 years to be exact, of great teachings coming from modern India. That's modern India you're talking about. Lord Buddha was modern India. 2,500 years, 550 years before Christ, that's recent. The rishis went way earlier than that. Uh, uh, so basically, that's why this uh, dissolving of the mind's limiting impressions can happen if you do all your work as worship. Or another way you put it, I think, was do all labor as love. So he would like put it in this way so that you could get over these key teachings between the eight limbs and between the Eightfold Path in the most uh, simplest and direct way. This truth has to be put into such a simple way that a baby can digest it without diluting it, he said. And he could do that, and he did it. So then go on to after all of this has happened, because I just made an important point, right? Is that don't forget the ones that went before as you take on the next one. Incorporate it all forward, pay it all forward, spiritually speaking. The next thing would be that perfect effort, which will get you concentration. Samyak Vyayama is across the board with dharana. So that concentration that came to me happened because why? Because I could turn on my work into worship rather than coming home restless and unhappy and seeking money as if it were the end all and be all of my life. Right? The person back there with the person to the person with the perfect view. No, money was never in their mind. Fame was never in their mind. Serving others was in their mind. Compassionate surface, like bodhisattvas. We call them Jivan Muktas in Vedanta, living liberated souls. They didn't have to come back. Nobody realizes that. These souls didn't have to come back. So why doesn't like devil take the hindmost in their case? You know, everything is going to hell in the handbasket. I've got mine. I'm out of here. That would be another form of greed, selfishness, wouldn't it? If the seers thought that way, the way the politicians are thinking, politicians of all countries, now they're just not buying houses and cars anymore. They're buying countries. So that's how it's gotten. Um, then after perfect effort, and I hope you're putting this together as I teach it. It's integrated, but it also has to do with everything that you're doing in life. This is the path you're walking that Buddha wanted you to walk. And I'm just showing how it is so much in line with these eight limbs we talk about in Ashtanga Yoga, which is called Raja Yoga too, the kingly yoga. And there's another name for it that I'm blanking out on right now. The eight-limbed yoga, Ashtanga, Raja, huh? Patanjala, thank you. So simple. Named after him. It's the only darshana in India that's named after its founder because they're so careful about the ego, you know. So basically they call it Patanjala after Patanjali. So that's the three names for this eight-limbed yoga. Well, here comes Samyak Smriti, my old favorite, right? Perfect mindfulness. And it's right across the board with meditation. This isn't going to be that hard to make the comparison stick. And basically, Dhyan is mostly, although most of us don't realize it as we practice, to gain separation from nature. It's not a popular teaching, but that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get away from rebirth, being forged into a form again, unless we can do it consciously. So they walked up to Vivekananda one day there in Chicago, probably when he was here in the late 1800s, and said, should a man be reborn? You've been telling us about rebirth for the first time. So we want to know, should a man be reborn or not? And Swamiji said, I certainly hope he will not until he can do so in perfect consciousness. So coming to earth, that's the demand. Coming into this prison house of bones and flesh and suffering, you know, it's going to be a very high asking price for you to be born in pure consciousness. It even take Shankara 8 years to wake up, then it's not going to be a picnic here. And as the Kali Yuga sets in, fewer and fewer spiritually minded people are headed this way. What did Dalai Lama say a couple of years ago? I'm not coming back again. This is my last incarnation. It's like well, we've come here and saved as many as we can, but millions and millions are going to go on to the next Mahayuga. That's 4 more yugas of the same thing. Each yuga is 400,000 years long, times 2, times 4, times 8, as it progresses. And then it all starts over again. That's where you get into this description of time being an illusion. It's an illusion because there's no beginning, middle, and end to it. But people believe it. Just like they believe in their birth and their death. That's spiritual suicide. You can't commit suicide. You just come back again in another body, but you can commit spiritual suicide by believing in birth and death. That believes you're a finite being. That's the illusion of finitude you're talking about there. That's giving yourself to the illusion of birth and death. And that's not a perfect view by any means. Not when suffering's at the heart of it all. Finally, and we'll end here, Samyak Samadhi. Perfect concentration is just like Samadhi. So if you have that Samadhi across the board from Samadhi, you find out that Patanjali and Lord Buddha must have run out of words. Just like I'm doing about now. Not possible, I know. Basically, they had Samadhi equals Samadhi. And that's been the case in all the case of all the great seers back, particularly in India, that they've had these key words that today we're trying to understand better by coming up with coining phrases like non-duality and so forth. Not two-ness, right, in Zen. That kind of thing is happening in a language we can understand. So Buddha's perfect view, Samyak Drishti, is Patanjali Yoga's 5 yamas, resulting in a calm mind and clear thoughts. Buddhism's perfect resolve, Samyak Sankalpa, is Patanjali's mastery of the 5 niyamas that render mind certain of its true nature. Buddha's perfect speech, Samyak Vak, is Patanjali's stillness of body, speech, and thought, and freedom from distraction. Buddha's perfect conduct, Samyak Karmanta, is Patanjali's absence of karma due to the free flow of prana through the nadis. I could have gone deeper into that one. Get that breathing going, that prana going. Good and bad have no hold on you anymore. You get the transcendent of that duality. Buddha's perfect livelihood, Samyaka Jiva, is Patanjali's pure acts based upon even physical, vital, and mental breathing. Basically, you're talking about the mind breathes too now. Like I just said, its in-breath is waking, its held breath is dreaming, its out-breath is deep sleep. And you can probably wrangle those around. But basically, that's the 3 movements. The mind breathes too. It breathes in consciousness. Samyak Buddhism perfect effort, Samyak Vyayama, is Patanjali's flawless orientation enacted by performing all work in wisdom. Krishna is a good teacher for that. Don't do any act in ignorance. It'll produce karma. But if you can do that act in wisdom, like work as worship kind of thing, then you won't have that karma come back on you. You'll be able to have not karma, but akarma, the absence of karma. And you'll get beyond karma and vikarma, bad and good karma too, because those are chains, gold and iron chains that hold you. So you want to be able to get beyond those. Buddhism's perfect mindfulness, Samyak Smriti, is Patanjali's attainment of no mind, affording transcendence of nature. That's Kaivalya. Get out, witness nature, come back to it if you want, but realize that you're not matter, you're not energy, and you're not thought. That's how the Upanishads put it thousands of years before Buddha. You're not matter, you're not energy, and you're not thought. So if you're none of those things, what are you? Which gave rise to who am I, basically. The whole system from Lord Vashishta to Ramana Maharshi, right? Atma Vichara, the whole who am I thing, came up because of that statement and that question that rose out of it over thousands of years. Buddhism's perfect concentration, is Patanjali's seedless state of asampragata, free of cause and origins. I'll end with this quote by Vivekananda. In the world, all things are done by people guided like lifeless machines. There is no mental activity, no unfoldment of the heart, no vibration of life, no flux of hope. There is no strong stimulation of the will, no experience of keen pleasure, nor the contact of intense sorrow. There is no stir of inventive genius, no desire for novelty, no appreciation of new things. Clouds never pass from this mind. The radiant picture of the morning sun never charms this heart. It never even occurs to the mind if there is any better state than this. Where it does, it cannot convince. In the event of conviction, effort is lacking. And even where there is effort, lack of enthusiasm kills it out. The worldly wise instinct is most difficult to root out. Isn't that beautiful? I mean, talk about a modern Buddha. There you have Vivekananda's complaint, his criticism, his Lord Buddha type ray of slap in the face that comes from even knowing just about the first noble truth and believing in it. Thank you so much for your attentions. I know I took you long, and please forgive me. Yeah. Jananim Shadadam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Pado Padme Tvaye Shritoa Pranamami Muhur Muhur O Ramakrishna, teacher of all, O Sharda, goddess divine, in bosom holding those lotus feet, salutations to both, ever be of mine. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat.